Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Brian Thatcher, and welcome to Mercy Unbound. It's a show that aims to provide hope, an avenue for healing, and one that will help you understand and then live the great mercy of God. With me today, I have a very special guest. She's got quite credentials here I want to share with you. She's co-founder of the Advocates Protecting Children, which serves and supports churches, schools, organizations, and individuals who seek facts and guidance on responding to gender idealism and activism. She's also co-founder of the Arlington Parent Coalition, a watchdog group in Arlington, Virginia, that works to safeguard parents' rights and children's safety in public education. She has a background in educational psychology, and today we're going to discuss her book, Desist, Detrans, and Detox. It's very detailed. There's a lot of references in here. She's got a lot of people recommending the book. I want to go through one of those before we start. It's available at sophiainstitute.com. I think any parent should read this book because it's going to help them get through if they have some difficult times with their children. I was reading right before the show, again, the recommendations on the book, and one hit me especially because it's like, this is exactly what I think as a medical doctor and one who has done research. Patrick Lappert, who's a plastic surgeon, medical doctor, wrote, "This book has come at a most important time in our public conversation about transgender medicine and surgery. It's an invaluable help in understanding how it is possible to see a 5,000% rise in this putative diagnosis and not hear the advocates ask a question about why this is even happening. Family, friends, counselors, pastors, and teachers will benefit from this highly reliable examination of what will be likely the greatest medical disaster of the last 100 years. Maria Keffler, welcome to Mercy Unbound. It's great to have you.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me, Dr. Thatcher. It's great to be here.
You've been involved in this work for several years, and as the doctor mentioned, the incidence of this has increased tremendously, and that I did research when I was at the Cleveland Clinic, and that just doesn't sit right with me. Is this more of a fad? People think it's a cool thing to have as a diagnosis, or are we just seeing something explode that wasn't known before?
I wouldn't call it a fad. We put the word cult in the title of the book, Desist, Detrans, and Detox, Getting Your Child Out of the Gender Cult. We did that very intentionally because cults do 8 things and trans hits every single one of them. This has been a manufactured crisis. Anytime we see an increase of 5,000%, if we saw an increase of 1/10 of that, I think we'd be asking, what's going on? Why is this happening? But we, as a culture, have been brainwashed into thinking this is all organic, this is all natural. These kids are just discovering who they really are. And nothing could be further from the truth. This has been systematically woven into the culture via education. It's coming down from the government. It's been seeded into every major organization. Partly, I mean, it's a multi-tentacled answer about why this is happening, but a big one is money. It's a huge moneymaker. I actually need to update my stats here because I've been told that they're behind. But a few years ago, I think 4 years ago, I looked up market reports on sex reassignment surgery. That's just the genital surgery, not double mastectomies for healthy, girls who have healthy breasts, who want to be boys, not hormones, not puberty blockers, just sex reassignment surgery. 4 years ago, market reports were saying that this was going to be a 1.5 billion with a B dollar industry by 2025. And I've now been told that that's too small, that it's been increased since then. So unethical doctors are raking in money hand over fist, harming people by cutting off healthy body parts. So that's one reason this is happening among a lot of others.
I want to talk about the terms. In chapter 1, you stated but gender has no meaning, no basis, and no objective test to measure it. What proponents of gender ideology call gender is never even defined. Is there any evidence that one can be born in the wrong body? And then isn't sex binary and fixed and personality more fluid and variable?
Mm. Yeah, that term gender, if you try to nail somebody down, what is gender? Give me a definition. You get things like, well, gender identity is however you feel about your gender. Well, any fourth grader who's been through English class knows you can't define a word using the word that you're trying to define. But that's exactly what they do. They just get into this circular reasoning. It's how you feel about yourself. It's what you think you are inside. Um, and no, there's no objective standard for it. There's an objective standard for sex. We are sexed human beings. We are male and female, and there's nothing except those two categories. Um, Gender actually was borrowed from linguistics in the 1960s. Doctor of psychologist, Dr. John Money, borrowed it from the term that is used in certain languages for nouns, like the Romantic languages, Latin, French, Spanish. I learned recently that Macedonian as well. Their nouns have gender, feminine noun, masculine noun, neutered noun, completely linguistic term. Until Dr. Money in the 1960s, that's what gender was. He took that word and started applying it to people to describe our personalities, our tastes and preferences. Masculine people tend to do these things, feminine people tend to do these things, and apply it to gender roles. Women have fought, I would say both men and women have fought for 100 years to break out of those regressive sex-based gender roles. Men can't ever dance ballet or paint because that's feminine, and women can't ever do sports because that's masculine. We've broken away from that, but trans and this gender ideology is taking us right back to, oh, if you like bright, warm colors, you must actually be a girl, no matter what your sex body says. That's what gender is doing. But it really has no basis other than your personality and your preferences.
You know what scares me? I have a grandson who had some congenital defects at birth, and in the first year he had four major surgeries,
Mm.
and he barely survived. He's doing great now, but I always wondered uh, what that anesthetic, one, two, three, and four surgeries, the drugs hitting his brain, what that was going to do to him and
Mhm.
his wiring. And I read recently that there's like a significant increase in attention hyperactivity disorders. And I thought, well, it makes sense. Something's rewiring the brain. And we're talking about giving these young kids these all kinds of drugs. That's frightening to me.
It is. And there are no long-term studies on what puberty blockers do when given long term. We know what they do in the short term. I'm sure you know a lot more even about puberty blockers and Lupron than I do. But I do know Lupron is what's being given to kids to put a pause on puberty, which we don't even know if that's possible. Puberty is a very finite window, and that's what changes a child into an adult. And so you introduce Lupron, which Lupron was originally given to male sex offenders in prison to chemically castrate them. It had so many negative side effects, a judge deemed it cruel and unusual punishment, and so it was stopped. What did the manufacturer do then? They prescribed it to women with endometriosis. There's now a class action lawsuit against the pharmaceutical company who makes Lupron from women who were prescribed it who have migraines. They're in wheelchairs. They've had bone demineralization. They have a host of health problems caused by Lupron. So they can't give it to women. So who do they prescribe it to now? Children. How unethical can you be to have a drug that's so damaging that you can't give it to adult men or adult women, but you're going to give it to children long term? It's horrible what's happening to kids.
When I was at the Cleveland Clinic, um, I did research, and we would never consider, you wouldn't, you weren't able to. It's impossible to give patients drugs that there weren't studies on and long-term studies. And yet that's all been circumvented. And it's frightening to me because we don't know what we're looking at 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now in these kids.
Yeah, that's true. It's damaging their bodies. Some people called detransitioners. These are people who went through trans identification, perhaps went through medicalization, and they're starting to wake up and realize that they were sold a big lie. And so many of them have physical harms as a result of this. Um, Young women who had their breasts removed because they said they wanted to be men, healthy breast tissue. Doctors took oaths to say they would first do no harm, and cutting off healthy tissue. I can't think of anything that's more harmful than that. But we're already starting to see some of these harms materialize, and it has just been nothing but a politicized nightmare driving this. And it is horrific to look at what's been happening and say, how did we get here? How did this happen? And how do we put the brakes on this?
Walk us through how kids get into this, like a General Motors line
Mhm.
belt. They get on, and are there groups of people pushing this, and are the clubs? And I don't know. I'm not. This is not my area of expertise, and I don't know how these people find these people.
Well, at Advocates Protecting Children, we tell families that the three vectors, the three main vectors for trans identification are public school, smartphones, and social media. And I want to say, I hate having to say that about public school. I was trained as a teacher, licensed as a public school teacher. I've been a proponent of the public schools until 2019. That was when we pulled our kids out of public school and started homeschooling when we saw what was happening. But that's where it's being driven. Every high school and junior high school, middle school in the nation, I would venture to say every one of them, if not, most, if not everyone, have a GSA club, a Gender and Sexuality Allies Club. This is boots on the ground. This is where the indoctrination's happening in school. Ostensibly, this is a club for kids who are homosexual or transgender identified. But we talked to kids who got invited to the GSA club. Oh, just come and be an ally. That language, ally, what's the opposite of an ally? It's an enemy. There's no middle ground. You're either an ally or an enemy. And so kids want to be welcoming, they want to be considered allies. So they go to the GSA club. And a lot of these kids are very vulnerable. You see a lot of kids who are on the autism spectrum, kids with prior trauma. I've heard teachers and educators say they were taught in professional development meetings or by diversity experts who come to the school and give in services. Look for the kids who are sitting alone in the cafeteria. Look for the kids who are alone at their lockers. These are the kids you can invite to the GSA club. That's grooming. That's predatory grooming. Finding kids who are lacking friends and social structures. So they go to these meetings, they get sucked in. Talked to a number of kids who said, I didn't have a lot of friends. I'm on the autism spectrum. I had one or two good friends, but as soon as I said, hey, I think I might be trans, suddenly I was a celebrity at school. I was brave and stunning. I mean, do you remember junior high? Would you have given just about anything to have social power? Like, nobody can criticize me. Nobody can say anything against me. I can get teachers fired if they don't use the language I want them to use. That's a lot of power to give a kid. So that's how it's happening in the public schools. Right before I pulled my kids, I knew I was pulling them out of school. I walked the halls of my kids. It was a mixed junior high and high school, 6th through 12th grade. Nobody got more real estate on the walls than the LGBTQ kids. There were rainbows and pride flags and transgender flags everywhere. there's no mistaking who's important at the school. Um, but then there's also social media. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, has rules about what can be advertised to kids on radio, on TV, in movies, in magazines, in newspapers. There are no such controls on social media. It is the Wild West. It's completely unregulated. Every social media platform, Facebook, Reddit, Snapchat, Instagram, every single one of them have interest group rooms, chat rooms, and interest groups. And they're groups for pro anorexia. They're kids who get together and cheer each other on to starve themselves.
Mm.
And there's no one monitoring that. There's no one saying this is a bad idea. We need to control that because social media is set up to reward you for what you like. If you like something, they give you more of it and they'll connect you with other people who like that. Why? Because they're trying to sell your attention. The longer you're on social media, the more ads they can put in front of you. They're selling your attention. So there's pro-anorexia groups, pro-bulimia groups, there's pro-prostitution groups. There's one for everything you can imagine, and there are pro-trans groups. So you take a kid who, and all of us have felt this way at some time. I don't have any friends. Something's wrong with me. Why am I the way I am? They find one of these groups or influencers. There are influencers out there looking for kids who are struggling. They say, "Oh, you're feeling that way because you're trans. Come with us." They get into the group and they get love bombed, which is another cult tactic. You're so amazing. You're so wonderful. You're so brave. Nobody outside of us understands you. Those people are toxic and hateful. Stay with us. We love you. And it's just one more step into the cult. Smartphones. I don't think anyone under the age of 16 should have a smartphone. And I think even at 16, 17, 18, smartphones need to be monitored well by parents. The smartphone opens you up to everything else in the world. It is a portal to everything. I have a friend who says it's a portal to hell. And I think she's right about that because that sleazy drug dealer in a basement somewhere in Europe has access to your child if your child has a smartphone and no monitoring or controls on it. So those are the places where kids are getting drawn into this. I really advise parents, no social media. I'm starting to think even adults shouldn't have social media. It's such a hostile, unhealthy place. But definitely for kids, no social media, no smartphone, unless it's highly regulated and locked down. And if you can get out of the public schools, I strongly recommend it.
You mentioned about susceptible children, and my wife and I have 7 children, and every one of them going through their adolescence, teenage years had many bumps in the road. It seems like all the children are susceptible because that's a tough time in their lives, and it sounds like they're preying on these people.
Absolutely. Every one of us struggled, even the person in the school who looks the coolest and the most beautiful or handsome and looks like they've got it all together. Underneath the surface, they're struggling too. Adolescence, puberty is a hard time. Nobody enjoys it. But these kids are hearing, "Oh, are you uncomfortable with puberty? It's because you're going through the wrong puberty. Here, you need to switch sexes and you'll feel better," which, is not true. We're all struggling. And one of the really sinister things that's happening is the child's loyalty is being taken away from the family and put with the school or with the GSA club, with the trans community. And so one of the things I really encourage parents, I don't want it to sound like all doom and gloom, your kids are destined to fall into this. Really focus on your relationship with your child, keeping that relationship strong. And it's hard. Oh my gosh, 13, 14, 15. My husband's friend said those are the demon possessed years. I mean, and he's got grandkids now, but he said those ages are so hard. But really focus on keeping your relationship strong because you want to keep your child's loyalty with you keeping those avenues of communication open, even if it feels like the child's rejecting you all the time. Make sure they know that you are there, that you are listening, that you love them, so that the lies they're hearing, oh, your parents don't care about you, your parents only want you to be a certain way, and if you're not, they hate you. They need to have those lies really nipped in the bud, that they know, no, my family loves me. My parents might be goofy and old-fashioned, but they love me.
Is there any evidence in the literature that you've read? What's it like for the parents and brothers or sisters of the teenager that's struggling?
It is just a nightmare for families. Um, Families that I talk to, they just say this is the worst thing we've ever gone through. And I'm glad that you mentioned the siblings because I think the siblings often get left out. They kind of get forgotten in this. But a friend and I did a series called Common Sense Care, Parenting Gender Confused Kids with Truth and Love. And we did an episode on siblings, what siblings go through with this. And as we were preparing to do that episode, I was researching, trying to find out what's in the literature, what are best practices, what's happening out there. I could not find anything about siblings of trans-identified kids except for the trans activists teaching how to get the sibling to come along and use the preferred pronouns and all of that, how to get the siblings to fall in line, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. And as we were doing that episode and talking through it, we said these kids have lost a sibling and the parents have lost a child because males and females are not interchangeable one for another. A wonderful story I heard, and I can't cite it because I don't remember where I read it, but it was a young woman who insisted that she was a man, and she did so for, I want to say 5, 6, 7 years. And her family came along and did what they should, or what they were told they needed to do, which was agree with her and affirm it. But then she became a young adult and decided that she'd been wrong, and she transitioned back to being a girl. And her sister started crying and hugged her and said, my sister, I have missed you so much."
Hmm.
Because it's a fake persona that the person's putting on. It's not reality. And so these families are losing a child. And I hear that from families all the time. I want my daughter back. I want my son back. It's not that they don't love this child. It's that the persona that their child is putting on is not real. This is not a real person they're pretending to be. They're trying to get away from who they really are. The term dead name really gives that away. That's what trans identified people call the name that their parents gave them. They call it their dead name. That gives it away. They're trying to kill off who they were and remake themselves into something else, which is so sad. It's so heartbreaking to see these kids. Typically, they are in some kind of pain. This is what this is about. They're feeling uncomfortable with puberty. They're suffering some kind of prior trauma. They've got a loss in their lives, whether it's a divorce in the family, a death of someone they loved. They've got autism, which puts them at odds in so many ways socially. They're trying to find an answer. Why do I feel this way, and how can I fix it? And the trans activists come alongside and say, you feel this way because you're trans and you fix it by transitioning. And it's a lie and it's heartbreaking. And I want to encourage people, if you're going through this with someone, have a lot of sympathy for them because most of the people who are doing this, they are deluded and they are lied to. They're not, um, they're not doing this because they're trying to make your life hard. They're not doing it, most of them, just because it makes them cool and popular. They're doing it to escape something. And unfortunately, during the time that they're living this trans-identified life, they're not dealing with whatever it is that they're trying to escape.
I think that's a beautiful point. A big question I have is, okay, you're doing surgeries on all these children and young adults. We don't even know what the long-term results are going to be, but we do have 3, 4, 5 years. Do these people have are they healthier mentally? Are their suicide rates decreased? Or share with us the what you know at this point in time on how these kids turn out.
Yeah, again, there's not a lot of long-term studies on this, on transition, because it is so new. But we do know there's a great study out of Sweden. They were one of the first countries to accept LGBTQ lifestyles, marriage equality and all that. They also have a national health care, so they can follow everyone. They keep track of everyone. This is one of the problems we have in the United States with privatized health care. I can't call a gender clinic and say, how many of your patients, have committed suicide? Well, that's private information. We can't tell you that. But out of Sweden, they followed tens of thousands of people who went through sex reassignment surgery over a 30-year period. At the end of that, what they found was those people had a rate of suicidal attempt and ideation and completed suicide that was 19 times higher than the general public. We see this in other studies that have shorter duration. There seems to be an initial honeymoon period when they first have the surgery, start the hormones, whatever. They're like, yes, this is the thing. This is great. I feel great. But after 1, 2, 3 years, things start sinking in. You can't avoid who you are and be healthy. You just can't do it. You can pretend for a while, but God made us what we are, and we can't avoid that forever. And after that initial honeymoon period, no, we see mental health rates just plummeting. People are not happy. They're not doing well. You don't see very many people who have been living a transgender lifestyle for 30, 40 years who are like, awesome, it's great. This is exactly what I needed. So many of them are damaged and broken and really regret what they've done.
Comment on some of the states. I mean, can't they actually come in and almost take the child away from the parents if they refuse this type of surgery? Or what's that picture looking like?
Yeah, it's really horrifying the number of states who have outlawed so-called conversion therapy. And I need to back up and explain that a little bit. Conversion therapy used to be what was done, and it was unethical and it was abusive. They might take a person who's homosexual and expose them to electric shock, being
Mm.
plunged into icy cold water, things that were supposed to avert them from attraction to the same sex. These were abusive practices. They've long been outlawed. As far as I know, nobody does that anymore. It's not legal, but that's what conversion therapy was, those kinds of abusive practices. Now, conversion therapy, if you read the language, it's anything that tries to change a person from being same-sex attracted or being transgender identified. What that means is even if somebody says, you know what, I am attracted to the same sex, but I don't want to be. I want to be attracted to the opposite sex and I need help to do that. In over half the states in America, it would be illegal to help them, even if they want help. You cannot try to change someone's um, homosexual or transgender identification. Now, what's a little bit ironic about that, hypocritical about that, is schools, social media influencers, they're absolutely taking healthy kids and trying to turn them into trans kids. But they say, oh, no, 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 we're just helping them be who they really are. So yes, in many states in the United States, um, a parent can be turned into Child Protective Services for not being affirming of a child's transgender status, and schools are actively hiding things from parents. Um, the way I got pulled into this was going to a meeting at my local at Arlington Public Schools here in Arlington, Virginia. There's a transgender students working group policy meeting. And I sat there and watched about a dozen people around a table talking about how parents are a threat to their kids if they don't affirm transgender status, and the school needs to protect these kids from these bigoted parents. I was horrified. That was the day I stopped telling people, go to send your kids to public school. That was the day I started saying, get your kids out. This is scary. This is unhealthy. And I know parents who lost their kids to CPS. California, Oregon, the state will take the children. There are states that call themselves sanctuary states that encourage kids to run away from states that don't have these conversion therapy law bans, encourage the child to run away, come to their state, become a ward of the state, get put in foster care, and given transgender medicalization.
It reminds me of the old saying, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's a
Yeah.
not quite reality.
Mm.
Let's talk a little bit about transitioning back to the original. Why do these children, adolescents, young adults decide that this isn't for them and they want to go back, so to speak? What is it, a mental health thing, or what's the reason?
Um, I work mostly with parents who are dealing with younger kids, teenage kids, but what I see is often when kids go out into the real world, so to speak. I don't really like that term real world. I teach high school and I tell my high school kids, you're in the real world. This is your reality and it's the real world. But when they get out into the adult world and they no longer have someone providing them room and board and food, um, suddenly they have to go to work. They have to make their own meals. And I've heard them say, gender just suddenly wasn't that important anymore. I've got to make a living. I've got to put food on the table. They don't have the time or the space to navel gaze and just sit there and think. I've heard a group of young women talking about how when we were in high school, we'd sit in our rooms just talking about how, oh, I know that I'm transgender because I don't like pink. And so that means I'm a man. And they just spend all their time ruminating on this. And then they get out into life and they said, it's just not that important anymore. They realize what a farce it is. For kids who are younger, it really takes parents speaking truth. It takes parents sort of following a procedure of deprogramming and asking the right questions and setting boundaries for the children to have the space to stop listening to all of the lies that are being shouted at them and have space to really stop and think and listen. One young woman I know of, her parents pulled her out of school when she adopted a trans identity and put her in a very conservative Christian homeschool program. And this girl just hated it. She said it was awful, but she said it was exactly what she needed. So that was the first time other kids were pushing back on her. And she said, I told them I was transgender. And they said, well, what does that mean? How do you know you're transgender? Where's the proof? And she said, I set out to prove to them that they were wrong. And I started doing all this research and I realized I was wrong. There was nothing grounding this. It was all false. And after a year in the homeschool program, she detransitioned, realizing that she'd just been lied to.
Now, when they detransition, okay, let's say a male transitions to a female and then they want to go back to male, do they just stop their drugs or then do they have to take male hormones, or how does that work?
Well, it all depends how far they've gone. There's different stages of transition. The first stage is social transition. That's where they start dressing as though they're the opposite sex, where they demand a different name, different pronouns. That is a treatment protocol, and schools should not be initiating this or supporting this or deciding upon this because it is a treatment protocol. And I'm sorry, school teachers with bachelor's or master's degree, or even PhDs, they do not generally have psychology, psychiatry, medical degrees. They shouldn't be instituting treatment protocols. But the social transition, if that's as far as they've gone, all it takes is them, I'm going to go back to dressing like a man. I'm going to cut my hair like men do. And I'm going to stop calling myself Jane and start calling myself John again. That's fairly easy, except if you think about it, everyone around you has been required
Mm.
to call you Jane. and call you she and accept you in this persona, that's really hard. I hear detransitioners say that it's really hard to admit I made a huge mistake. I'm sorry for requiring this of you. And so just getting over that social transition can be hard. If they've started medicalization, depending how long they've been on the medicalization, it can be very hard. One of the very nefarious things that I've learned about the cross-sex hormones is once you've been on the wrong hormones for a while, so a man taking estrogen, a woman taking testosterone, your body may stop making its own hormones and not start again.
Mm.
I know several older men who were transgender identified for years. Walt Heyer is one. He's in his 80s now. He did everything, did the whole shebang with hormones and surgeries. And then he realized he'd been lied to. He has to take synthetic testosterone to keep his body functioning, and this is one of the really insidious things that's happening. The pharmaceutical companies really have no reason to stop people from taking these hormones because once somebody starts on cross-sex hormones, the odds of them being a lifelong pharmaceutical customer are very, very high. Once someone's had surgery for removing body parts, altering body parts, those things don't end well. I see person after person after person posting on social media about the botched Frankenstein surgeries. I read that all the time. This Frankenstein genital surgery. They're sold this lie that, oh, yes, we can craft you a neo-vagina. No, what you end up with is a gaping wound that tries to close for the rest of your life.
Mm.
Men who've had that done, they have a wound that they have to put a dilator in every day to keep it open.
Mm.
It's not a vagina, it's a wound. The things that I don't know if you're familiar with Jazz Jennings, it's a young man who I think I know his parents were responsible for trying to turn him into a girl. Um, just the health consequences that he's had are just horrific. He joked in a tweet that after his surgery where he had his penis removed, he basically split in half at the crotch and he's had multiple surgeries trying to fix it. And it's horrific. Why would you ever do that to your child or to any child?
And yet in today's society, it's like, well, we want them to reach their full potential, and if it's good for them, it's good for me.
Mhm.
There's what's right and wrong anymore. We don't have the scientific evidence, do we? I mean, really?
Oh, no, there's no evidence that one can be born in the wrong body. It's a religion. It's a mystical religion, believing that somewhere inside me, there's this gendered spirit, soul, inner person. And, we used to understand that if the mind didn't align with the body, something was wrong with the mind. And we need to work with the mind to get it aligned with reality. But now we live in a philosophical era where there's no such thing as truth. Material reality is not important. It's all what you think. Your truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth, and they're both true. And we know that's not true. By the way, if someone tells you there's no such thing as truth, they are asking you not to believe them. A wiser man than I said that. Um, we can't say that material reality has no bearing on us, but that's what's happening now. Oh, if I have a female body, I'm born as a woman, but I think I'm a man, well, then we need to change my body to align with my mind. That's where we are today, and it's just unconscionable, unsupported, unscientific, unreasonable, erroneous. I'm running out of synonyms for it, but
Right, right.
there's nothing good about it.
People, we've been discussing Maria Keffler's book, Desist, Detrans, and Detox. It's available at sophiainstitute.com. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. The book has got a lot more in it than what we've had time for today. Maria, just wrap up any closing thoughts you want to tell parents or children, or take as long as you need here, but
Yeah, I would love to leave on a more hopeful note. If listeners haven't been introduced to this before, this can seem really scary, really overwhelming, and it is a scary and overwhelming thing. It's shocking that it's happening, and it's scary that our kids are vulnerable to it, but I want to leave with hope. This is not a surprise to God. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything that's ever happened has been done before. We've been there, done that. This is just a new iteration of a very old heresy. In fact, there have been genital mutilation cults before. This is not the first time. But educate yourself about what's going on, learn about what's going on, set those guards around your children, put those boundaries of safety around your children. And I want to encourage parents. Too many parents today think we've got to be our kids' friends. We can't ever make our kids unhappy. If our kids are unhappy, we're going to lose them. No, your job as a parent is to parent that child and put those boundaries around. If you know that there are nefarious people out there who are harmful to your child, you put those barriers up to keep those people, those institutions out of your child's life. Keep your relationship with your child as healthy and positive as you can. Be in your child's life, even if they act like they don't want you there. They do. Even teenagers, as much as they're like, leave me alone, get out of my life. They want to know that they're loved. They want to know that they're protected. They want to know that you are there and you are their rock. If this has happened to you, it's not the end of the world. Parents are getting their kids back. There is a strategy. I lay out that strategy in the book. We followed what successful parents have done to get their kids back and how to apply cult deprogramming strategies to this specifically. And parents are getting their kids back, and you can too.
well, that's great. And as you mentioned in the talk, the higher incidence of suicide, and as a doctor, I say, show me the medical evidence, and it's not there.
Mm-mm.
But people, I hope you enjoyed this show. Maria, thank you so much for joining me today on Mercy Unbound. And people, I really ask you to share this video or podcast. We have to get the truth out. The truth will set you free. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light. And Marie, you've done a great job with your book. People, I recommend you get this book, Desist, Detrans, and Detox, from SophiaInstitute.com. We're going to keep up the great work, and I look forward to having you back again on Mercy Unbound.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you so much. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video portion. The podcast can be heard at anchor.fm/drbrian, BRYAN Thatcher, THATCHER, and on all the major podcast forums. I would love to speak at your church or conference, and please consider supporting our efforts to spread the truth to a hurting world. Thank you again. And for more information, go to the website at drbrianthatcher.com.